It's the OG fact checker here to give you a juicy tidbit of history that's verified. Yes, I'm back from my unannounced 2-week break. I hope you missed me. It was sheer luck that I stumbled across the person who's the focus of this episode. And the funny part is that he was under my nose for months. I would always migrate towards his artwork at the Smithsonian American Art Museum, or SAM, even though there's a Lois Mailou Jones and a couple of very colorful William Johnsons competing for attention right across the hall. Then I researched his story and understood why I kept instinctively seeking out his work. Medicine and science has come a long way in helping people with a disability, like those with a defective or missing appendage. But the ability to adapt, thrive, and perform as though that disability doesn't exist takes a persistent person with a curious mind. The examples of people who do just that are endless. Watch the Paralympic Games sometimes. It's more nail biting than the Olympic Games, especially archery, where people with no arms compete. And don't forget Jim Abbott, the left handed pitcher who was born with a deformed right arm. He was the first U.S. pitcher to beat the Cuba national team in Cuba at the Pan American Games. Today, we see robotic arms and realistic prosthetics, but in the 1920s, it was a different story, especially if you were a Black man. What do you do when you have to deal with discrimination and you have a disability? Do you give up on life, never challenging yourself until you ever so slowly disappear? Or do you flip that negative and turn it into a strength that can give you a career you never imagined, like Jim Abbott's? Well, that's what Horace Pippin of Westchester, Pennsylvania did. He turned a negative into a positive, and he did it before Abbott. Pippin, a World War I veteran, lost the use of his right arm in combat from an enemy bullet. But he took his childhood passion for sketching and flipped that passion into a lifelong career as a folk or self taught painter during the New Negro Arts movement, more popularly known as the Harlem Renaissance. That's why the title of this episode is One Arm? No Problem. Horace Pippin was born in February 1888, only 25 years after the end of the Civil War, in Westchester, Pennsylvania, the oldest child of Danielle and Christine Pippin. His grandparents were slaves, and his grandmother witnessed the execution of radical abolitionist John Brown, who led a mass of slaves on an attack at Harper's Ferry, Virginia. The family, which included a younger brother, moved around upstate New York, first to Goshen, where his parents worked as housekeepers. It was in Goshen, a town in Orange County that appeared progressive but had segregated schools, is where Pippin was exposed to Victorian Gothic and colonial architecture and horses at the racetrack, which inspired him to draw. He hoped someday to attend art school. When Pippin was 10 years old, his father, Daniel, died at the age of 26. His mother, Christine, then moved her children to Middletown, not too far from Goshen, where she first worked for a hotel before working as a housekeeper for a private family. Some time later, Christine remarried someone with the last name of Green, and they had 4 daughters. Unfortunately, after the last child, Papa became a rolling stone, abandoning the family, which meant 15-year-old Pippin was now expected to step in. Leaving school at 8th grade, he worked on a farm, in a coal yard, and at a feed store until he found long-term work as a hotel porter. Pippin's mother died in 1911, and at 23, he moved to New Jersey and worked a myriad of jobs like storage company mover and iron molder. While he was working as a molder, he decided to enlist in the New York Army National Guard's 15th Regiment in 1917 when World War I erupted overseas. But this wasn't just a regular schmegular regiment. This regiment was known as the Harlem Hellfighters, an all-black troop later renamed the 396th Infantry Regiment when the 15th was accepted into the U.S. Army. The Hellfighters spent more time in combat during World War I than any other American infantry unit and was the most celebrated. They made a name for themselves on the battlefield while also introducing jazz to France. Two members of the regiment were jazz musicians, James Reese Europe and Noble Sizzle. Though a majority of troop members did come from Harlem, there were also teens and men from Brooklyn, towns along the Hudson River, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Pennsylvania. They were teachers, night watchmen, porters, doormen, and elevator operators, and all they wanted to do was fight for their country. After basic training, Pippin and his regiment were shipped to Brest, France in December 1917. As a show of goodwill, musicians in the troop surprised French troops by playing a jazz version of La Marseillaise. Noble Sissel wrote in his memoir about the special greeting. As the band played 8 or 10 bars, there came over the French people's face an astonished look, quickly alert, snap into it attention, and salute by every French soldier and sailor present. Ordinarily, the regiment would be used as laborers for the Army's services of supply to unload ships and clean latrines. And they were used as such, but not for latrine duty. During a cold, harsh winter, the troop laid about 500 miles of railroad track between December 1917 and February 1918 from inland to sea. And those tracks were later used by the U.S. to transport supplies and ammunition to the front lines. But a March 1918 German attack surprised undermanned British and French armies. With no other immediate options, the regiment was split between the British and French. Pippin was transferred to French High Command and given a month's worth of training before being sent to the front line. The French welcomed the troops, recognizing their skill and desire to fight. They saw them as comrades in arms. But the British armies were the exact opposite, and those serving under the British were subjected to racism. Pippin began documenting his life in a journal in his neat cursive that included pencil sketches, like this one and this one, that illustrated his observations. One afternoon in May 1918, the Germans drove what remained of his platoon into a shell hole where he and a buddy were trapped and starving for days as relentless gunfire flew all around them. In his journal, he states he knew if they stayed any longer, they would surely be killed. So he and his buddy agreed to separate and crawl out of the shell hole, find the Germans with the machine gun, and take them out. Just as he makes it out of the foxhole is where he gets shot. He let me have it. I went down in the shell hole. He clipped my neck and got through my shoulder and right arm. My buddy came to me and he did what he could for me. So basically, his buddy eliminated the German with the gun, triaged Pippin's wounds as much as possible, and then took off for some reason, maybe to get help. But Pippin states in his journal that he never saw him again. Meanwhile, he's on his back in that trench, relentless gunfire all around him all night into the morning. He's weak from blood loss, suffering from his wounds, as well as from hunger because he hasn't eaten in 3 days. The gunfire lets up for a little bit, and then all of a sudden, a French sniper comes out of nowhere and sees him in the trench. The sniper tells him he just took out some Germans and he's patrolling the area for more. He opens up his mouth to tell Pippin something, and just as he does, a bullet goes right through his head, killing him. He falls into the trench and onto Pippin. Now, Pippin is trapped under a dead body, in addition to being wounded, exhausted, and hungry, and subjected to pouring rain. He has no idea when he'll be rescued. All he can do is raid the dead body that's on top of him for water and bread. With little energy left, he goes to sleep. For how long he doesn't know, before 2 French soldiers find him, lift the dead body off him, and rescue him from the foxhole. Pippin's war story pretty much ends there in his journal. He was transferred to a field hospital in Lyon, France, where they operated on his shoulder, and then transferred again to Vichy to a hotel used as a hospital. In December 1918, he was well enough to be sent home on a hospital ship. He reached New York in January 1919. Pippin was discharged from the Army in 1919 with a right arm that had limited mobility, connected to his shoulder by a steel plate. He was awarded a monthly disability payment of $22.50. The French government awarded the Harlem Hellfighters, which included Pippin, the Croix de Guerre in 1919, but it took the U.S. government 26 years before they would award Pippin the Purple Heart in 1945. Return to civilian life was difficult for Pippin and for many Black men who returned from World War I. They faced racism and hostility, and the fact that they served and fought for the country meant absolutely nothing. And being disabled meant extremely limited job opportunities, for the only thing available for Blacks was manual labor. Unsure about his future and with no direction, he went to visit his brother in New Jersey. A friend introduced him to his future wife, Aura Jenny Featherstone Wade, a twice widowed single mother who was 4 years older than Pippin. This wasn't a love match. This was a match of convenience. His pension would somewhat support the family, and Wade would take care of him. They married in November 1920 and moved to Westchester, Pennsylvania, where she had family and, ironically, where Pippin was born. Wade wasn't a stay at home kind of wife. To supplement Pippin's pension, she did laundry and Pippin helped her deliver it, which suggests that though it was initially a marriage of convenience, they developed a partnership and supported each other. She gardened, he raised roosters, and played games with his stepson and the neighborhood kids. They went fishing together and had a good life as a couple. Portchester was the type of town where everyone knew each other, and even though the schools were segregated, the local organizations weren't. He and his wife participated in the American Legion. He organized the Legion's drum and bugle corps, and she volunteered her time in support of the Legion Auxiliary. Both were active in the local church, singing in the choir. Pippin played the organ, which may have helped him with improvement use of his right arm. Other instruments he played were the mandolin, guitar, and drum. He visited the VA hospital in Philadelphia regularly about the pain in his right arm that seemed to get worse with bad weather. But the French had fixed his arm in such a way that the steel plate was basically a part of his body and nothing could be done. Pippin never abandoned sketching. Westchester was very inspirational for him. The people, the architecture, the pastoral landscapes were subjects in his sketches, but his arm made this activity difficult and painful at times. 9 years later, in 1929, he figured out a way to use his right arm through the use of pyrography. Now, pyrography is burned wood etching. Back then, you would take a hot poker and burn a design into the wood with the tip of the poker. Pippin held a hot poker in his right hand as well as he was able to, and then used his left hand to move around a drop leaf table from his dining room table against the hot poker tip, and manages to create this etching, which he titled Losing the Way. Then he moves to oils on canvas, and even though his arm is weak and he can't work for long periods of time, he paints in the little garden created by his wife, holding the wrist of his injured right arm in the fist of his left hand, thus controlling his motion to suit the tiny brushes and brushstrokes with which he advanced from side to side of the canvas. Pippin finally catches his groove, and he works on his first oil painting for 3 years, adding layers of paint to achieve the look he was seeking. His wife is supportive. She realizes he needed to do it, and it was good for him. She stays out of his way. In fact, the entire neighborhood stays out of his way when he was painting because they noticed a change in him. He creates a series of war paintings, and when he is done with those, he moves on to portraits of various people in town, including his wife. All these paintings are stacking up, and Pippin tries to sell them in town, basically to justify why he painted them. Most buy them because they like Pippin and want to support his hobby. One of these people was Pippin's barber, who bought a painting, Buffalo Hunt, that his wife wouldn't allow him to hang in their home. Imagine the barber's surprise when that painting was bought from him much later by Pippin's art dealer for $75 because the dealer had promised it to the Whitney Museum for $150. Pippin's big break happens in 1937 at the Westchester County Art Association's annual invitation show. He submitted two paintings for the exhibition, the first Black man to do so, and it makes the president of the association, Christian Brinton, nervous. But his nervousness was misplaced. John McCoy, who was married to Anne Wyeth of the famous Wyeth family of painters who lived in the next town over, had submitted some paintings as well. When McCoy saw Pippin's work, he told Brinton they were the best pieces in the show, and he said he should bring both of them downstairs. Brinton, still nervous, only brought down one. McCoy brings his father-in-law, N.C. Wyeth, a famous artist who illustrated the 1911 publication of Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island, and shows him Pippin's work, and Wyeth agrees with McCoy. He tells Brinton that not only should he bring both paintings downstairs, he should also give Pippin a one-man show. Brinton visits Pippin to view all his artwork and chooses 10 paintings for a small exhibition where only one painting was sold. But the exposure got people talking. An art critic, Holger Cahill, and an art dealer, Hudson Walker, liked Pippin's work and borrowed 4 from the exhibit for a show at the Museum of Modern Art in 1938. Picking up on the momentum, Hudson Walker becomes Pippin's art dealer in New York, and he puts his art on view at his gallery in New York. Though Walker wasn't able to sell them, he was able to get the attention of a Philadelphia art dealer thanks to Brinton, Robert Carlin, who saw them in Walker's gallery, loved them, and offered Pippin a one-man show of 25 of Pippin's works in Philadelphia Gallery in 1940, which was an instant hit. Art critics gave good reviews, and people shelled out money to buy. All 25 paintings were sold. Walker encourages Pippin to continue, no doubt to keep the money rolling in, and talks about him to everyone in the art world. Pippin catches the attention of philanthropist Albert C. Barnes. Barnes, or rather Dr. Barnes, was a successful pharmacologist and an art collector who supported progressive education, advocated for social justice, and believed art shouldn't be segregated. He made his money by manufacturing a patented cold remedy before and during World War I and had accumulated an extensive art collection. Barnes watches as Pippin paints, and after seeing the finished product, buys that piece and 6 more. He even writes the introductory catalog to Pippin's show, invites him to his home to view his private collection, and arranges for him to attend lectures there by Violette de Mazia, an art teacher from Paris who tutored Dr. Barnes and his staff. But Pippin was an occasional no-show. Missing these lectures didn't stop Pippin from painting. His work is praised, but they don't sell. Meanwhile, all this activity keeps Pippin away from home, leaving out his wife, who becomes increasingly isolated. The more he traveled and painted, the more they grew apart. Eventually, Dr. Barnes and Carlin, Pippin's art dealer, have a parting of the ways. Dr. Barnes accuses Carlin of exploiting Pippin. While this may be true that Carlin was exploiting Pippin, the artist didn't feel that way. He was loyal to his art dealer and considered him a friend. In turn, Carlin continued to hustle for commissions, scoring an illustration job with Vogue and selling to Hollywood players such as Claude Rains and Edward G. Robinson. Pippin was making money, but his extravagant spending and constant absences affected his marriage and home life. His wife became argumentative and irritable. She suffered from delusions and became paranoid, convinced that Pippin was cheating on her. Plus, her son was drafted into the start of World War II. It's not clear if this behavior was the result of diet pills she took, which was basically speed, to lose weight, but her erratic behavior increased to the point where she had to be admitted into a mental hospital. He told the doctors everything he could about her mental state and told them to call him when she was good to come home. Pippin never got that call. Now that his wife was gone, Pippin was away from home more than before, often out drinking with his buddies, bragging about his art dealer. Each night he would come home drunk and pass out, only to sleep it off and do it all over again. On July 6, 1946, a housekeeper found his dead body. He was 58 years old. The death certificate stated his heart stopped, but it was later reported as a stroke. 2 weeks later, his wife, Ora Jenny Featherstone Wade Pippin, died at the mental hospital. She was 62. During the course of Pippin's brief artistic career, he produced between 80 and 140 works. You can see some of his works at the Smithsonian American Art Museum, the Hirshhorn Museum and Sculpture Garden, the National Gallery of Art, and the Phillips Collection in Washington, D.C., the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and the Barnes Foundation in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the Baltimore Museum of Art in Baltimore, Maryland, the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art in San Francisco, California, and the Wichita Art Museum in Wichita, Kansas. I love history. You came for the truth. Thank you for staying for the story.